Ask any driver who ran one, and they'll tell you what the red valve cover meant. Power you could feel through the seat. What almost none of them knew was that the engine under that cover had been built to cheat. It's the one they still defend in parking lots and comment sections, the last real Cummins, the motor that would outlive the truck wrapped around it. And it died young, on a schedule nobody could explain, for reasons the legend gets backwards. 20 years later, the men who tried to drag it back from the dead managed to kill it a second time. They used the same weapon both times. And almost nobody who tells this story has ever connected the two. What they were actually worshipping isn't what the badge implied. The N14 arrived in the early 90s wearing the language of a new generation. Electronic, computer-controlled, modern. Pull the valve covers and the modern engine disappears. Same 5.5-inch bore. Same 6-inch stroke. 855 cubic inches, 14 liters, in the same block, breathing through the same 4 valve heads, draining into the same oil pan as the 855 big cam that Cummins had been building since the Carter administration. The N14 wasn't a new engine. It was a 30-year-old engine handed a computer. And the part the drivers loved most was named after a piece of hardware most of them never saw. The big cam. The name refers to the camshaft, 2.5 inches across, where the old one measured 2. A fatter cam slamming the fuel in over a shorter window, burning it cleaner. Cummins didn't build it for power. They built it in the wake of the 1973 oil embargo, when diesel turned from a commodity into a crisis, and every fleet in the country suddenly cared less about horsepower than about how far a gallon would carry them. It was an economic fix that happened to make an engine which ran forever. By the time it became the N14, that old architecture had learned a new trick. The top of the range made 525 horsepower and 1,850 pound-feet of torque down at 1,200 revolutions per minute, most of it just off idle, the kind of low-end shove that pins a loaded trailer to the road. The badge for that engine was the red valve cover, and it wasn't a styling choice. Red meant a factory rating of 460 horsepower or more. The lesser engines wore black. So when a driver clocked a red top across a truck stop, he knew what was in the frame before he read a single spec. And the real 525 wasn't a 460 with the screws turned in. It had 2-piece pistons and its own injectors, a different engine wearing the same paint. So here is the most durable diesel Cummins ever put in a truck, the one men ran past 1,000,000 miles and rebuilt instead of replaced. Which leaves one question. If it was that good, who decided it had to die, and why couldn't anyone stop them? The answer starts in 1991, with a lie told in software. The electronics that made the N14 modern were called Select, Cummins' own engine control system. A controller like that can run an engine clean under one set of conditions and dirty under another. Cummins set it to run clean through the conditions the government measured and dirty through the ones it didn't. On the EPA's certification test, a controlled laboratory cycle of stops, starts, and moderate speeds, the N14 behaved. It hit its numbers. But out on the interstate, locked into the long, steady, high-speed cruise that cycle never simulated, the calibration backed off the emissions controls to save fuel, and NOx poured out at up to 3 times the certified limit. It passed the test it was built to pass. It was never built to stay clean once the test was over. Cummins built around 400,000 engines like that, starting in 1991. And they had company. 7 heavy-duty engine makers, Cummins, Caterpillar, Detroit Diesel, and the rest of the industry's biggest names, had shipped roughly 1.3 million engines carrying the same illegal software. The regulators had a word for it that wouldn't reach the public for another 17 years, until a German automaker made it famous. Defeat devices. This was Dieselgate on trucks in the 1990s, and almost nobody outside the industry ever heard about it. The reckoning came in 1998. The government and the manufacturers signed consent decrees, court-supervised settlements, carrying $83.4 million in civil penalties, the heaviest environmental enforcement penalty in American history at that point. The companies paid, but the money was never what killed the engine. What killed it was a clause about time. Buried in that settlement was a mechanism the industry came to dread: a pull-ahead. As punishment, the manufacturers agreed that the next tier of tougher emission standards, limits already scheduled for years down the road, would be yanked forward and made mandatory early. The new deadline landed on October 1st, 2002, and the N14 as itself could not meet it. The 30-year-old architecture that made it tough was the same architecture that made it dirty. There was no version of that engine clean enough to clear the bar its own maker's misconduct had just dragged into the present. In September of 2002, weeks from the deadline, Caterpillar and Detroit Diesel went to federal court and asked a judge to push it back. They were denied. The date held. And so the most durable truck engine Cummins ever built ran out its final on-highway model year in 2002 and was retired, replaced by the ISX, a genuinely new engine designed from a clean sheet for standards the N14 could never have met. That's the correction the legend needs. Drivers tell each other the EPA strangled a perfectly good motor out of bureaucratic spite. It didn't. The N14 died on an accelerated clock because the people who built it got caught cheating, and the punishment was the calendar that ran it off the road. Nobody forced Cummins to kill the N14. Cummins built the gun, loaded it, and handed it to the regulators years before the trigger was pulled. And even then, it didn't entirely die. Gone from Europe around the turn of the century, gone from American highways in 2002, but Chinese manufacturers kept building it for years under the looser Euro 2 standards. A 2006 N14 was a Chinese engine. It became a favorite in the former Soviet Union, hauling freight in MAZ and KRAZ trucks. The engine America condemned found work everywhere America's rules didn't reach, which was the thought already taking hold back home. If the engine was illegal to build new but legal to rebuild, and if everyone agreed it would outlast anything that replaced it, then there was a loophole shaped exactly like a truck. They called them gliders. A glider is a brand new truck that rolls off the line with everything except an engine. New frame, new cab, new axles, new paint, and an empty engine bay. Into it, a builder dropped a rebuilt powertrain from a wrecked or worn-out truck, usually pre-emissions iron, bolted into a body with 0 miles on it. A new truck with an old heart. And under the law as written, that truck was not a new motor vehicle, because its engine wasn't new, so it didn't have to meet current emissions standards at all. The economics were brutal in the best way. A glider ran about 25% cheaper than a comparable new truck, and the rebuilt pre-emissions diesels got better mileage than the new EGR-choked engines fleets were being forced to buy. The biggest builder, a Tennessee company called Fitzgerald, was turning out between 5,000 and 10,000 glider kits a year, not a backyard operation, but an industry, a factory town built on skipping a generation of regulation entirely. And the engines drivers demanded for those empty bays were the holy trinity of pre-emissions diesel. The 12.7-liter Detroit Series 60 was the most common by far. But right alongside it, listed by name on Fitzgerald's own order sheets, were the pre-EGR 14-liter Cummins and the 15-liter Caterpillar. The N14 was back, never new, but reborn in the nose of a truck that had never turned a mile. The engine they were forced to kill was rolling out of a factory again. You can probably guess the government didn't let that stand. What's harder to guess is that this time the government had a point. Here is what the rebellion's fans leave out. The EPA put gliders on a dynamometer, and the numbers were obscene. A glider could emit up to 450 times more diesel soot and up to 40 times more smog-forming nitrogen oxides than a new truck off the same line. The agency ran the public health math and concluded the glider fleet was making enough fine particulate to cause as many as 1,600 premature deaths a year. Its estimate was that these trucks, a tiny sliver of the fleet, would throw off roughly a third of all the NOx and soot from heavy trucks in the entire country. The industry's own figures put it under 12%. Either number is a scandal, so the Obama administration moved to close the loophole, rewriting the rules across 2015 and 2016 so a glider with an old engine would finally be treated like the new truck it physically was. The 2016 rule came with a hard cap. Small builders would be allowed no more than 300 non-compliant gliders a year, taking effect in January of 2018. For Fitzgerald, building 10,000 a year, 300, was a death sentence. The company needed proof its trucks were clean. So it went and bought some. Fitzgerald commissioned a study from Tennessee Technological University, a real school, with a real engineering program to test glider emissions and, ideally, find them no dirtier than new trucks. The arrangement was about what you'd expect once you look at it. Fitzgerald paid roughly $70,000 to fund the research and separately agreed to build the university a new research center. The study was led by a Tennessee Tech vice president with no graduate-level engineering training, and the testing meant to vindicate the trucks was done at a facility owned by Fitzgerald. It worked for a while. The EPA, by then run under a new administration by Scott Pruitt, cited it to justify repealing the glider cap, which Pruitt formally proposed on November 16, 2017. Then it came apart. Tennessee Tech's own faculty looked at the work being done in their name and revolted. The university opened a research misconduct review, concluded the study's clean emissions claims were inaccurate, and did something institutions almost never do. It publicly withdrew and disavowed its own research and asked the EPA not to rely on it. The best evidence the rebellion ever produced turned out to be the same kind of artifact that started this whole story, a controlled result, manufactured to pass a test, that fell apart the moment anyone honest looked at it under real conditions. What followed was chaos. With the repeal stalled, the EPA tried a backdoor. Word went out in mid-2018 that it would not enforce the cap for 2018 and 2019, quietly waving the gliders through. The timing was almost too perfect. The New York Times broke the non-enforcement story the day after Scott Pruitt resigned under an avalanche of ethics scandals on July 5, 2018. Environmental groups sued over the letter on July 17th. The D.C. Circuit granted a stay the next day. And on July 26th, the acting administrator who'd replaced Pruitt, Andrew Wheeler, reversed the agency's own position and reinstated the cap. The repeal was never finalized. The limits stood. Then the calendar did to the gliders what it had done to the engine inside them. From 20 to 21, every glider built had to meet current emission standards, which meant the entire reason a glider existed, dropping a tough old pre-emissions diesel into a clean new chassis, was over. You could still build the truck. You just couldn't give it the heart anyone wanted. So the N14 died twice, and both deaths were the same death. The first time, the engine the drivers swore by was killed by a lie its makers told a machine, software built to fool a test. The second time, the men who loved it enough to resurrect it bought a lie of their own, dressed it up as science, and watched it collapse on the witness stand of public record. The toughest truck engine America ever built couldn't be beaten by the road or the load or the miles. It only ever lost to the truth.